Hello, I'm Anne Blanford, and I'm going to give a very brief introduction to our text on qualitative HCI research, going behind the scenes. The book was published in 2016, so why are we doing it now? Well, basically because several people have asked us recently, where did the cartoons come from and why did they feature lions? The answer to the first question is that they were commissioned especially for the book, and I'll answer the second one in a few minutes. Overall, this is the contents list. We take you through the process of planning, conducting and reporting a qualitative study, involving all the steps from considering what the point of a study is, what's its purpose, through the key steps of data gathering and analysis to presenting the results, including an account of all those things that you have to take account of along the way, such as your properties as a researcher, ethical concerns, any theory you might be drawing on, and resources and constraints that you're working with. Why do we write it? Well, basically, within human-computer interaction, there is little discussion about the methods that we apply, whether those are in qualitative methods, quantitative, design, or other forms of computing methods. We don't talk about what we do, we draw it very often from other disciplines. And I've come across many instances where people clearly have a poor understanding, particularly of qualitative methods. So we thought it would be useful to go behind the scenes. And to do this, we drew extensively on our own experience. But why the lions? We drew on the analogy of a wildlife film because over several discussions between Dom, Stefan and myself, we realised that there were some really nice accounts of how films had been made, particularly wildlife films, where they had introduced boulder cams or camera crew had sat for days in freezing circumstances or very uncomfortable just to catch a shot of the target animal. Or they had set up clever camera traps. So a lot of the techniques were ones that wouldn't be obvious to us as viewers. And we thought, well, something similar happens in HCI research, that all those details of how you go about recruitment, how you gather the data, how you do the analysis, are often kind of swept under the carpet when a paper is published about a study. We wanted to go behind the scenes. So we start by talking about how you plan a study, thinking about what its purpose is, what resources and constraints you're working with, and particularly ethical considerations. We talk in depth about techniques for data gathering and analysis, and then reporting findings. I've presented them in a superficially logical order here. In practice, things don't always go quite this neatly, and very often there is iteration through these different steps. One key element is sampling or recruitment of participants. Qualitative research works with relatively small numbers, but gathers rich data. It also tends to study complex problems where it's not easy to decompose into simple hypotheses that can be tested. So the reliability and generalizability of findings from a qualitative study depend heavily on how participants are recruited and how the data is gathered. And good data is the foundation for good qualitative research. So it's a really important starting point, and we consider it as in some depth. The cartoon that seems to crop up most often is the one about gathering data. We cover the 7 techniques that are listed here: observation, action research, contextual inquiry, think aloud, interviews, focus groups and diaries. Of course, these techniques may often be applied in combination or adapted, for example, for much more online data gathering. But we go through those 7 in details on the assumption that once you've mastered those 7, then you have a good basis on which to adapt, from which to adapt. In terms of analysis, we think about different qualitative methods, but essentially there's an iteration between really analysing the data, getting to grips with the data, and stepping back and seeing the bigger picture. As my extra little photo in the top right-hand corner here reminds us, themes don't emerge. You, as a researcher, identify themes. You bring your own understanding, your own interest, your own interpretation to the data. So in analysis, it's important to be reflexive about how you go through that iterative process of constructing narrative, checking against data, being driven by the data in order to develop a good narrative that is faithful to the data at the end of the day, and also interesting and important. As I kind of already hinted, you very often don't just apply one method. You'll often apply multiple methods and construct an overall process around multiple methods of data gathering and even possibly multiple methods of analysis. So the components of a qualitative study can be put together in different ways, and there isn't one way that is right to the exclusion of all others. For example, grounded theory explicitly interleaves data gathering and analysis, whereas most approaches to thematic analysis presuppose that the data has been gathered already. Neither is right and all others wrong. What matters is that the approach suits you as a researcher, suits the research question, and is also appropriate to the situation. Often the final step is the reporting of results, and it's really important to balance clarity of findings so that the narrative can be understood by others, with an honesty that means that you're not producing a biased account. And it can be challenging to achieve this balance between honesty and clarity. So we discuss issues around how you report and how you build the narrative. One of the challenges with qualitative research is that it can often be regarded as kind of wishy-washy and vague and unreliable. So we discuss explicitly how to maximise the quality of your study. There are lists of qualities of qualitative research, such as, actually, is it worth reading? But possibly most importantly, are the results valid? Do the results follow from the questions and the methods that have been applied and the analysis that's been done? What are the results, and are those results useful? And what has been your role in it? Again, we discuss these, drawing on literature from other disciplines, but applying it specifically in the HCI context. And finally, of course, as one always does, we conclude and we provide lists of further resources so that you can find out more, drawing on resources from other disciplines, probably almost more of them from HCI. There are, of course, many kinds of studies in HCI. There are design studies, there are qualitative ones, there are quantitative ones. All matter. One of the charms of HCI is that we do draw on a wide variety of different methods and draw insight from them and are creative through them. In terms of empirical studies, quantitative studies tend to give assurance. They tell you whether something is true or not, whereas qualitative studies give insight. They can often answer questions like, why? Or how? How come? Our aim in writing this short text has been to help people to do better qualitative studies in HCI, and we hope it has succeeded. Thank you.